And we are live. Welcome to Friday, everybody. And as you can see by the shirt I'm wearing, I am still not participating in their new normal. And I don't want you to either. But we are going to talk about some of the things going on inside their new normal today. And then, as we usually do on a Friday show, when we do that, we'll take a turn and we'll talk about things that are more practical for us in our own lives. Remember, we only talk about what's going on in society to understand it and prepare for it. In most of our daily activities, we should be really heavily focused on what I call our sphere of control. I learned about the sphere of influence and the sphere of concern, or circles of influence and circle of concern, from Stephen Covey many years ago in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And over time, and I'm not the only one that's done this, I've added a circle inside the circle of influence, the circle of control. And so it is way more important that we focus on our circles of control than even our circle of influence. Because, well, as human beings, we have this weird ego thing that even people that are very introverted and don't actually talk to a lot of people still have this idea that our influence is bigger than it is. And that our actual thoughts, like what we think about a thing, actually influences the thing. And I do think thoughts can influence a thing, but only if it's a mass thought, and that's used against us. And the only thing we can do to change that is to focus again on what we actually control. So we're going to talk about some really cool stuff today, but we're going to talk about some current event stuff too, since I can't stop getting emails and comments and seeing people posting it in social media. We're going to lead off very, very, very briefly, friends, with the Will Smith smack that was seen around the world. What a pile of bullshit. You just watched an infomercial for a Pfizer product for a condition known as alopecia, which most people didn't know. And I promise you, by the end of next week, the human interest stories are coming. I'll show you a freeze frame of the slap that looks like the sorriest little bitch slap you've ever seen when you see it in slow motion. And it looks so obvious. And I'll tell you why I thought it was fake as soon as I saw it the next morning, because I certainly didn't see it during the freaking Oscars, because I don't watch bullshit celebrity pat themselves on the back award ceremonies where they can lecture the common man like me about why we're wrong. I don't really give a shit, but since you guys want to talk about it, we'll talk about it for all of about 2 minutes. It's all we need to kill it. We're going to talk about inflation a little bit differently. It's something nobody's saying but me. But you know all those stimmy checks you got? Yeah, they're gone. They're gone. I'm going to show you with math how gone they are and how now we're in a negative flow for 99% of people and their stimmy checks. Maybe it's 99.9%. And then 70% of the world, roughly, sanctioned Russia to punish them. And our own State Department bragged about how good a job we did punishing Russia. We crashed their economy. Yeah, that lasted like 14 days. I'll show you on a graph what happened to the Russian ruble while our dollar continues to devalue itself. And Putin's like, if you do want to buy Russian oil and gas or whatever, Russian anything, you better find some rubles. Right? Like it's not like this is a one-way thing in this magic land where we're always right and we always win the way that you're taught on TV. Next, Bitcoin maxis are losing their mind right now because there's a movement to make Bitcoin proof of stake instead of proof of work. I'll tell you why that's just Fantasyland bullshit. And all you Bitcoin maxis, or even Bitcoin, or at least like shitcoin minimalists like me that like Bitcoin's the best, but there's some places for some other things. Just relax. Just stop worrying about this. I'll tell you why it's not a thing to worry about. Next up, this is something I can use your help with when I get to it. If anybody can find it, I'll give you $50 worth of Bitcoin if you can find me a headline that says what I'm going to tell you. A headline said for a day, and I never screen captured it as I was getting ready for this week. And now there's stories about it, but the headlines have vanished like a fart in the wind. I cannot find a single headline. And I know I saw them. I know I didn't have a dream or a hallucination. I didn't go Joe Rogan and smoke any DMT this week and see things that weren't really there. So I want to know what happened. And I'm not going to tell you what it is until we get to that segment. And that is where we're going to turn the corner. I'm going to tell you real briefly about Float Fest. I'm going to be there, and I'm going to let you know about some of the other badass, cool people that you can meet if you come to Float Fest. By the way, Float, the new version of Float is up and running. I can't get on it because you have to do a password reset, but I'm sure that'll get rectified in time. I've given some feedback on that already. Then we're going to talk about reading the farce. I'm going to show you a video of about 7 minutes. I cut out of one that's over 30 minutes long, where this gentleman is, I believe his name's Tom Wessel. It's Wessel is his last name. I should have put his name in the notes. But this guy's amazing. I sent these videos to Ben Falk and said, you're going to love this. You can use it in your PDCs. And he's like, that dude was one of my professors. Right? This guy is awesome. Like, I'm going to show you, this guy's going to walk through the woods, point at a tree, and show you, right, a tree that fell, even though the tree's gone, the mound and the depression it left behind, right? And say, I can tell you within minutes in history when this happened and what caused it. And he'll do it in two different ways, and both of them will blow your freaking mind. And it's actually not that hard to do if you know how to read the forest, which this guy teaches you fully in these videos. I'm going to give you a link to all the videos in the audio notes. And then if you have the knowledge of history to go with it. And that's going to lead us into a discussion of what I'm going to call modern ancestral wisdom. We're going to have to flip time a little bit to understand that. And with permaculture, we always talk about stacking in time. So we're going to stack in time by flipping time in our understanding of time today. We're going to go a little bit into the world of the physicist when it comes to ancestral history and understanding now being now. How about that for a redneck duck farmer? And then we're going to talk about what I call the 4 Ds of self-management. These are also known as the 4 Ds of time management. I'll tell you why that is a terrible term to use. Just a terrible term to use because it screws everything up. And I'll give you my version of this quite old technique on how to manage time. And I'll tell you why we're going to talk about ancestral wisdom now with us being the ancestors before we're dead and flip time. You can't manage time. You can only manage you. And you need to manage you. Well, we'll wait till we get there. Let's start off with this. And I'm going to put up one of my banners before we go into this. And I'm going to ask, for those that are in the live chat, do you think the Will Smith Chris Rock slap was faked? The answer, yes, no, maybe, or most likely. So those are your 4 choices. Before I pull up the image that I'm about to show you, I want to give a little bit of a time lag for people to answer that. So again, do you think Will Smith slapping Chris Rock was a complete fake? Answer with yes, it was. No, it wasn't. That was real. That was a pissed off Will Smith. He ain't that good an actor, man, just because he won some Oscars and shit. Or maybe it's possible. Or, not just maybe, but most likely. But I'm going to hold out. Okay, we got a yes, a most likely, a don't care, a yes, most likely, yes. I don't care either, but I do care because people are actually paying attention to it. So I want to show you this if you haven't seen this yet. And this is why I thought it was fake right from the minute that it started. So if you saw the video clip, which I saw once because once was all I needed to see, you see Will get pissed off and start yelling. He goes storming up at Chris. Chris stands there, puts his hands behind his back, and leans forward into the slap. And it looked pretty violent. But if you notice, because I'm going to tell you this, if I'm actually pissed at you and I slap you in the point of the chin where that slap landed, I will knock you the fuck out. And I mean that. I will knock you the fuck out if you lean in like that and let me hit you quicker than if I punched you. I know that sounds crazy, but if you understand how knockouts happen, basically what happens is it isn't the impact of the chin that causes the knockout. The brain sits inside the skull, and when you hit somebody hard enough on that part of their head, it could be the side of the head, it could be the chin, you cause the brain to literally rattle around inside the skull, lights go out down to the ground. Usually the person gets up, there's no long-term damage unless it happens over and over again. Then we have what happens to boxers over years and years and years. And maybe that wouldn't happen to a boxer who had been conditioned and trained. But you got this wimp, for lack of a better term, being slapped by a guy the size of Will Smith. If that was a full-on slap, it would have been maybe not knocked out. Maybe he doesn't know how to do it, even though he pretended to be a boxer in a movie or whatever. But you would have seen a lot more of a reaction physically from Chris Rock. But if we look at this, weak elbow, sissy smack, point of contact, Chris is making eye contact, bracing for the impact, got his neck tucked, leaning in, and no attempt to block. I don't know about you, but Will Smith is a pretty big dude. I'm not saying he's tough or anything. I'm just saying he's a pretty sizable dude. If that man is coming at me physically, I'm not putting my hands behind my back and leaning into it. This whole thing is fake, in my opinion. And I believe that it is fake due to the fact that Pfizer is about to release, you guessed it, a drug that just came out of stage 3 trials to treat alopecia, which is what supposedly Jada Pinkett Smith has, which she doesn't. She has a buzzed haircut for a G.I. Jane movie. This is retarded. And all of a sudden, all the virtue signalers are more worried about blaming Donald Trump for Will Smith hitting Chris Rock than they were about the thing they were upset about last week, which is a war in Ukraine, which is probably about to come to an end. So it's time to distract you and move on. What does this mean for your life? Unless you buy into this, unless you think this affects you in some way, this means absolutely the square root of nothing. And I just, with as many people as have been emailing me about it and talking to me about it, I wanted to at least acknowledge it and say, now you can put it on the back burner. And I believe this was 100% fake. Before we move on, now that we've started to up our numbers of people in the live stream, we want to remind you guys, if you have questions for me and you want me to answer them, or comments for me that you want me to answer, I don't generally, most of the time, respond while I'm presenting. What I do is I have a little feature in my back office here on StreamYard, a little star. Questions and comments come in that are for me to respond to. I hit the little star. I don't read them. I just know that they're for me, and I star them. And then at the end, I go through them. And as long as they're not completely off topic or trolling, I respond to them. But I won't do that if you don't follow the rule. And the rule is at least first couple 3 words, put them in all caps for me. And please do me another favor, guys and gals. Really, don't put things in all caps unless you want me to flag them for follow-up. Because a lot of times there's things in all caps that there's no follow-up for me. It's just a flat-out statement that's really to somebody else. So all caps for my response only, at least the first 3 words. I'll star them and try to get back to you at the end. So the next thing I want to talk about is your stimulus checks. Remember the stimulus checks? And there were a lot of people like, it's stupid. They shouldn't do it, but I'll take my money. I got my money. You got no money. You are negative from your stimulus checks as of right now, and you already were, but now it's more clear how painfully gone your stimulus trucks are. Your stimulus checks are duck shit. They don't exist. It's like they never happened. There is no free lunch. So this is from Bloomberg, not exactly the bastion of right-wing talking points, but U.S. households will experience what they're calling a $5,200 inflation tax this year. This is based on a family of 4. So that's what I based my numbers on. In other words, if you're mom, dad, and 2 kids, the quintessential nuclear family in America, which they're trying to destroy with every ounce of their being, your existence will cost you a little over $5,000 more in 2022. I want to point out this ignores all the inflation from January 1, 2020, when about this shit started, up to January 1, 2022. So there's 2 years missing from this. So when you're like, Jack, but if you had 4 kids, you got almost $11,000. Yeah, that's gone too. And we're talking about for the average person here. Let's take a look at another part of the same article here. And you can see what you're paying more for and how much for. So this means that if you actually make more money and you are better off, your costs are going up almost $10,000. right? When they say 5,200, they're creating a median, and they're saying you got your bottom, and your bottom 20 to 40%. They're somewhere in between $2,000 and $4,000 in extra costs. Now, they're not much lower in actual costs by choice. The inflation's so bad, that's all they can stretch to, and they're having to figure out. They're the ones that are eating lentils instead of ground beef this week, or hamburger helper without the hamburger, or hamburger helper with half a pound instead of a pound of burger in it. So when you do that math and you look at what the average person got in stimulus, and then you factor the inflation that we experienced between 2020 and January 1st this year into it, and you add that onto it, the stimulus is gone. The stimulus is gone. The stimulus is gone. There is no stimulus. You don't have any stimulus. It's like you never got it. You would be better off if they didn't give it to you. Okay? Because inflation is transitory is a made-up buzz phrase that they thought might get you to vote Democrat a little bit longer. And even if inflation is transitory, it doesn't fix this problem. In other words, the prices go up, and if the inflation stops, the prices still lock at the higher rate in most instances. Now, I do think over time you'll see the cost of fuel go down, and that will have some effect on the price of other things. But you know what corporations do. Like if they're selling right now, if you go down to my local Lowe's, a pressure-treated 2x4x8 is about $11.50. I mean, this is record runaway cost on lumber. Now, if that cost comes down to like $8, everybody like, oh, that's great. Well, go look what the 2x4x8 piece of pressure-treated lumber cost you a year and a half ago. Right? It was about $4. And so we're going to be saddled with this forever. The only way you get to a point where it starts to actually go away isn't the inflation ceasing and then pulling back down. It's the underlying income coming up to meet it, which good luck with that during what's probably going to be a worse recession than 2008, 2009 when it all hits the road. But even if everything rectifies from here, even if we stop screwing around in Ukraine, even if we let the peace process play out, and we let things go back to quote unquote normal. We were screwed before that happened. We don't have this inflation, right? We don't have this $5,200 inflation tax. And God, I can't believe Bloomberg is actually using the right phrase here. It's an inflation tax. Inflation is a tax. It is the most insidious tax because it's a tax on money you've earned and are holding. It's a tax on money you will earn in the future and spend. It's a tax on everything that you own. It even hits the property you own because you think, well, I own real property. So when my value of my property goes up, I'm better off. And my underlying debt goes down. Yeah, but what happens to your property taxes, dumbass? When your tax assessor starts drooling like a dog looking at a steak as they reassess the value of your property and the tax you're going to pay on it. This is a tax that hits everybody. And I mean absolutely everybody. And all the stimulus is gone. And for one more lesson for those that are slow learners, because I have a phrase that I try to put out a lot. And that phrase is, life is a teacher, but some people are slow learners. For the slow learners, one more time, there is no free lunch. No free lunch at all. We are going to pay the bill. This is the bill for the trillions of dollars of spending coming due. Trillions of dollars, these people. And we got nothing. We got nothing. Those of you that have been around since the beginning will remember when we did the original bailout stimulus bullshit, you know, destroying the free market in order to save it, the big handoff from Bush to Obama. I took a look at the amount of money that we spent during that. And all this, we're going to fix the roads, which we still haven't fixed. We have a new infrastructure bill to fix the roads. Almost none of it's actually for infrastructure. So they were going to fix the roads, right? I had a friend during that named Sean up in Arkansas, and they listed all the companies and all the jobs that were created by those companies from the stimulus. And they said his company had more new jobs than they had total employees. And by the way, during that period, he laid off 2. He was a very small company, like 8 employees, and he went down to 6. But they said his company had 14 new jobs. He was on a list. That's the bullshit that went on. And I said, well, what could we have gotten for that roughly $1 trillion? And I figured out, and it wasn't an advocation to do it, just if we were going to spend that money to stimulate the economy, we could have put, for the same money, a 2-kilowatt solar system, grid tied, with battery backup on every owner-occupied home in America. Those systems would still be producing power today. We would have actually, I don't like stealing money to do things like this, but in essence, property owners are the ones that pay the most taxes. It would have been them getting their money back. And we would have something, and we could look at it and say, there's a thing that we now have. And it's not like, as bad as government is, it's not like we never get a thing that actually lasts. The highway system we have today, they haven't done jack shit with it right since the 60s, but it was, the Eisenhower administration that made that happen and connected the entire country together with a highway and road system. As an anarchist, do I like the way that it happened? No, but I have to admit it's useful, and it's still there, what's left of it, the remnant hanging on, hopefully not falling into rivers anytime soon. But there's a thing. You can go to places right now, you can walk up stone stairs in certain parks that were built by the Civilian Conservation Corps under Roosevelt in the Great Depression prior to World War II. We used to at least do things that stayed with us. We just spent trillions of dollars on nothing but Netflix subscriptions and freaking Peloton bikes that are sitting upstairs in people's extra rooms doing absolutely fucking nothing because they were going to get in shape during COVID, and instead all they did was order more freaking DoorDash. And that's what you just got. That's what you just got. You got your entire future wrecked economically for a 2-year party while people were locked in their own homes. Now, one of the ways you could have done really good is you could have piled some of that money into Bitcoin. But everybody's losing their mind right now because Bitcoin's massive energy uses faces $5 million shame campaign from environmental groups. I don't give a shit. You're talking about an asset that trades into billions of dollars a day. And you want to piss away $5 million as some money you ripped off from some nonprofit to shame Bitcoin? We don't care. All you Bitcoin maxis, shut up. This isn't going to happen. What you're talking about doing is basically trying to bribe the data centers that host the major mine pools that mine Bitcoin to change to proof of stake. This requires a fundamental ignorance in literally every single aspect of Bitcoin and how Bitcoin works. So you could say that this one data center somewhere that has all these miners in it, right? Or this pool that has all these miners in it. This is a target. Okay, but how does that work? You might have a data center that's part of a pool, but you probably have a lot of pools. Well, you do have a lot of pools that even if they have a data center, a lot of the people in their pool are in that data center. There's also computers all over the world that just participate in that pool. I can be part of a pool that some guy in freaking Istanbul, Turkey is running. And I can switch my pool anytime I want. The machines are largely run by individuals and small companies that pool together. So first of all, there is no since 60% of the mining hash is in this country. No, it doesn't work that way, stupid. Right? The next thing is you're asking the people that have invested millions of dollars, billions of dollars in equipment to mine, to stop mining and give up the value of the equipment that they bought. Yeah, that's going to work. This requires a fundamental ignorance to believe, but it requires a disingenuous level of virtue signaling to start. The people behind this know everything I just told you. They don't think this is going to work. They just want to be paid attention to. They just want to try to convince you that Bitcoin is going to boil the oceans. And I didn't grab a screenshot of this, but I wish I would have. I saw something somebody put up on Twitter this week, and it was an article saying that by the year 2020, Bitcoin was on track to use all the energy in the whole world. It's just more FUD. It's more nonsense. It's more bullshit. And those of you that are still holding out about Bitcoin, I don't even listen to you anymore. I don't even listen to you anymore. It's very hard to listen to somebody tell you that something doesn't work, it's worthless, it's going to go broke, whatever, when you've been working with it since 2014 and it's done more to improve your wealth than all the rest of everything you've ever touched in your life. You tune those people out. You're not worth discussing this with anymore. At some point, maybe you'll accept reality. If you don't want to, you don't want to. I don't care. Let's go to happier thoughts, though. How about Float Fest? Float Fest is going to be April 29 to May 3rd, 2022 in Goss, Texas. You won't find out exactly where it is until you sign up to go. They're not going to give away the location. We don't want gate crashers at Float Fest. This is going to be awesome. Maybe you'll get to meet this chick who's pretty happy right here on the front page. I don't know who she is, but she looks happy. She seems cool to hang out with. See all those tents? This is like Freedom Lollapalooza, guys. It really is. If you want to come, please do. You can camp. There's nearby hotel if you prefer to use a hotel. I'll let you guys know. The setup's on a Friday. I'm going to be getting there on a Saturday just to mitigate my amount of time away from home, from my wife, and all the stuff I have to take care of here because I leave her to have to take care of that while I'm gone. We'll have some help probably, but I don't like being gone any longer than I have to if I'm not taking her with me. And I will be doing the hotel thing so I can get some work done in between things. But it's going to be hard for me to pull away because I want to show you just some of the people coming, man. Kat Bowden's coming, John Bush, Danny Sesson, Colin Cottrell, me, myself, and I, Jack Spearcoat, James Patrick, Tim Pinochet, Tina Marie, Alma Somer, Rebecca Powers, David Rodriguez, and Joey Lewinsky. I'm not done yet. Okay. Larkin Rose will be there. I'm really looking forward to meeting Larkin. I've always wanted to. Jason Bassler, I've met him online and through interviews only. Really looking forward to shaking his hand. Scott Horton, Eddie Bravo, I'm really looking forward to meeting him. Sam Tripoli, Derek Bros. I know Derek through John, but I've never met him face-to-face. Melissa Wild, Tatiana Maroos, right? She's an awesome singer and big voice for Bitcoin. Steele Sessions, Romero Romani, Bitcoin Ben, and Dr. Anthony Kaufman. And David Croissant, Spike Cohen. I'm really looking forward to meeting him. I really dig some of the stuff he posts. Ernie Hancock, and Tino Sanchez. Guys, you're talking about kind of a festival environment with all of these cool people. Like, that's a lot of awesome people to meet, and it's not that expensive to come. I think most of you will struggle more with distance and time than the financial cost of being there. But definitely learn more about it. You can learn about it at Float Fest official website. I have a link in the show notes for you, and I don't want to give the wrong URL extension. So let me give it to you right now. It is floatfest.com. I thought it was a .com, but floatfest.com. You can get the schedule, see what everybody's speaking about. You won't see what I'm speaking about, but that's my fault. I haven't actually given them my topic yet. It is still to be determined, but I will try to get that done and get that over to the folks there in just a bit. So if you guys want to meet some really cool people, if you want a major networking opportunity, if you want to come hang out with me and meet some of the coolest people in the world of liberty and free speech and telling the truth, and if you want to find out how true it is when I tell you you're not alone, come. Because I know it feels good when you're in one of these live chats and you're talking to all these people you've never met. And it does send the message that we're not alone. And I think that's great, but I don't think it's the same. I don't think it's the same. And I know that because I run workshops here. And I run workshops here every year. And I run my big one in the fall. And we'll have a body count on my property of about 90. And this year we'll probably have more like 85 to 80 because we did 90 last year and it was the absolute edge limit of what I can do. And I think pulling it back is going to be necessary. And what ends up happening is I end up with a wait list of people that want to come that's 40 to 60 people that want to come. And a lot of times, some of those people on that list are names that I know that have been here 3, 4, or 5 times. And they're personal friends. And I feel like a complete asshole telling them no. but I know why they want to be here. One of our favorite people, he might even be in the chat today, said the TSP events are where I go to see my friends. That's amazing. There's not really a head count limit at Float Fest. It's on 100 acres of a private ranch. So I don't know, maybe there is a head count where they'll cut it off, but it's been open for a while. And if you want to come, you can come. And you can experience what we do here in a place without that cap. Now, I don't think it'll be exactly the same, because when you do a smaller event, there's more intimacy. You know, we have everybody on 3 acres, and we have, you know, everybody in one place for presentations and things like that. But man, guys, you have to get outside of your bubble and your cocoon, and you have to actually form real relationships. And that requires palms pressing together and handshakes, right? And I want to say something here, because we end up dealing with it a lot here at this event when we do things like people introduce themselves, and somebody will finally, you know, be willing to state what's inside. And we find that probably 30 to 40% of the people that come to my events are very much introverted people. They're not comfortable talking to strangers. They're not comfortable talking about themselves in front of a group, but something magical happens. They cease to be that way while they're here. And I'll tell you why. Because it's safe. It's safe to say who and what you are, and to say what you think. And to share the things that are important to you in your life. That's what these types of events are like. And so there's a lot of people that I find that would say, you know, I've wanted to come to this for a long time, but I never did, because I was afraid that I would just sit alone and not talk to anybody. I'm not big on going. Don't let that shit hold you back. Come out, meet people. You don't have to say a lot till you feel like it. Trust me, when you have that many people around, and so I just realized when I said that might be like the complete opposite of what I'm trying to. The snail just went back in the shell. That many people? Oh, no. Because what you have is this giant group of people, and natural subgroups form based on interests and association. And you'll find at my events, I can speak directly. No assholes. Nobody that's dominating other people or whatever. Because if we ever get that, you're going over the fence into the street. And I can't speak to exactly how Kingsley and Aaron run their events, but I would imagine it's probably pretty similar, because every liberty-oriented event that I've ever been to has been like this. Every single one of them. Liberty Forum, all of them. Everything I've ever gone to. Even the permaculture ones, I have to say, have always been like that. You see people sometimes for the first time in their lives come out of their shells. If that's you, if you're thinking, I'm going to say this actually. If you are at all are inhibited from coming to an event like this because of that, you need to come. Trust me. I don't lie to you. I don't bullshit you. I never tell you anything that isn't true intentionally anyway. And I'll tell you, you'll have one friendly person to talk to, guarantee me, because I talk to everybody to the best of my ability all the time. And I'm the guy that, like, if you start telling me something and it's not something I really know about, but I've already heard somebody that does, I will literally walk you over and introduce you to somebody. And that makes that first step really easy. And I want to say that to those of you that are more like me, you're more networkers, you're more extroverted, you're able to talk to anybody freely. You know, even if it takes making notes, Bill in the black hat knows about aquaponics. So when somebody's talking to me about aquaponics, I know a shitload about aquaponics, but maybe I'm being pulled in 72 directions. I want to put that person with Bill, because I can give somebody 5-10 minutes, and I've got to, if I want to keep my commitment to talk to as many people as possible, I got to kind of move around. So please do that, guys. Like, figure out who people are. There's a lot of you guys are better than me at it. My buddy David, I talk about all the time. He is a master of this. He'll sit he'll sit back with me when we're doing our big events. There's, like I said, 90 people in there. And he's like, well, that's Bill, and he lives in Missouri, and he really wants to know more about it. I'm like, holy shit, how do you know this? He takes notes. So those of you that are that person, try to be that person. Try to be that bridge for people, because you'll find that people are like, I don't know who to talk to. But when they have a common ideal, immediately there's a kindredness. And those of you that have been in any kind of and I don't mean it as a college thing alone, but any kind of fraternity, you already know what I'm talking about, right? So if you were in the military, especially like if you were in the Army, you meet a guy that was in the Army, there's a certain kindredship. If you were in a fraternity and you meet a fraternity brother, then you have that immediate kindredship. But I think fraternities are much bigger than we think. So when you have somebody that's really into permaculture, they meet another permaculturist, they're going to talk. And do not let this, I'm going longer than I wanted on this segment. But I've heard so many people tell me that they were intimidated to come to an event. And I think those are the people that most need to come. And I think, honestly, those are the ones that get the most out of it. I want to transition here, and I'm going to show you a video now. This is a video that I don't remember. I'm sorry that I'm not going to give credit to the person that deserves credit for it. Somebody emailed me this, and it was one of those things where I had like a million things going on. I'm batching. I call it batching my email, right? We're going to talk about self-management. Some people call it time management at the end. And so one of the ways I handle that is I do my email in batches. I get up first thing in the morning. I take care of my basic things on the farm. I come in here to do work, and I do all my email. Every bit of email that came in overnight. Then I do my show. When the show's done, things are processing, things are uploading. I batch my email again. And then I batch my email one more time in the afternoon. Fridays, I usually don't. Fridays, you might not hear from me till Monday, or I might do some batching on the weekend. But that way it doesn't build up that much. And some of you are like, man, Jack responds immediately to his email. Don't get addicted to that shit. You just got lucky. You sent your email right before I batched, right? So I don't even know why I'm talking about that now. I want to show you this video again. That's right, because I was batching my email when this came in, and I'm like, yeah, I'll look at that. I clicked the link. It loaded, and I deleted that email. And I was like, and I started hearing this man in the background. I'm like, whoa, this is freaking Einstein of the forest talking. So I rewound it to the beginning. I shut everything off, and I watched 3 videos in a row, and it's Dawn. Dawn gets the credit. I'm sorry I deleted your email, Dawn, but obviously it impacted me. So Dawn Sutton here says, I sent you the Reading the Forest video. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. Was that wrong of me to say, ma'am? I'm not a biologist. Anyway, Dawn, thank you. That was freaking awesome. And what I did, I went into the first video, which is over 30 minutes long, and I pulled what I think are 2 of the most impressive pieces out of it. I edited them together, and then I want you to see this. And what I want you to realize when you're watching this, if you watch these videos, you'll walk through the forest, you'll see everything this guy's talking about. It's not even that hard to do. It is kind of specific to the New England and this particular video, New Hampshire area. But this type of thing happens all over the world, and everywhere there's a forest. And if you add to it knowledge of history, you'll be able to do what this guy does. And I want you to think about it as we go through that. So here we go.
The ground is not smooth and even on the surface. It's irregular. And this mossy mound right here is a pillow. And the area behind it where all the oak leaves are is a cradle. Then there's another mossy mound, which is another pillow. And behind it, again, a depression that's the cradle. There's a number more behind me here over on this side as well. And they're all lined up in the exact same orientation. So this is definite evidence of a blowdown. If you get snow and ice loading, taking down trees, they'll come down whatever way they're leaning. But when they're all on the exact same orientation, that's wind. So that stone wall behind me is running from west in that direction to east in that direction. And if I stand on the pillow and look over the cradle, I'm looking this way, which is to the southeast. That's where the wind came from. The only stand leveling winds we get out of the southeast are from hurricanes. So what we're looking at is a hurricane that hit this site and toppled a number of smaller trees. These are not real big pillows and cradles, they're smaller. Now, I can still see part of the trunk of this tree here, and right here are 2 parts of a limb whorl. So I'm looking at pretty small white pines that were blown down by a hurricane. The only hurricane in this area of Keene, New Hampshire, where we are today, that is struck in the tenure of these trees that still have their trunks here would be the hurricane of 1938. Now, town records tell us that right around 5 o'clock, the wind speed started increasing. They've been gusting all day, all afternoon long, around 50 miles an hour, enough to bring down some branches and twigs and things like that. But between 5 and 6, the eye wall of the hurricane of 38 hit this area. So I'm guessing we would not want to be standing here right around 5:30, because I'm guessing it within 5:30 p.m. on September 21st, 1938, we're within a half an hour of when these trees were toppled. Now, like I said, these pines were somewhat small at the time, and I'm guessing they're probably 20 to 25 years old when the hurricane hit. So this side of the fence that has pillows and cradles and lumpy ground of all different orientations, there's a huge array of just boulders over there on the surface, which would exclude haying or crop field. But then all these young pines coming in, this is indicative that this was a pasture. And a pasture probably abandoned sometime in the 19-teens. And that stone fence there was built to keep animals in this pasture from getting in that crop field. If that crop field didn't have a pasture abutting it, let's say this was a woodlot, there'd be absolutely no need to build a stone fence. But having that fence there tells us that that was built to keep animals from getting in the crop field. So this was pasture, probably originally sheep pasture. There is barbed wire on this wall. That indicates that probably around the time of the close of the Civil War, this transitioned to dairy pasture, because barbed wire is not good for sheep. In their heavy fleece, they can't feel the barbs. They can get tangled in it and injured. So now we've got our two areas, crop field that then transitioned to hay field, pasture that was abandoned earlier than that hay field was abandoned in 1980, and this abandonment happening in probably the 19-teens. Young pine coming in just the way they did on the other side, and then the hurricane of 38 coming and hitting the site. Now, the hurricane of 38 was a monster storm. At the time it struck, it was believed to be the most costly in terms of property damage of any storm in the world. And on its 70th anniversary, they computer modeled if that exact same storm had hit New England at that time, the estimated property damage was $125 billion. That would eclipse any hurricane we've ever had, including Katrina and ones like that. And one of the reasons was it was a massive storm. It made landfall as probably a Category 4 storm, and it was huge, and it did something that no previous hurricane had done. The Weather Service had predicted it was going to turn out to the Atlantic well below Long Island and Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket. It didn't do that. It came in over Long Island, hit the coast of New England, right at the Connecticut-Rhode Island border, then sliced to the northwest, coming up over the Pioneer Valley of the Connecticut River in Massachusetts, then up over the spine of the Green Mountains in Vermont, eventually exiting over Burlington and Lake Champlain, going into Quebec. It was still a full-fledged hurricane by the time it was going to Quebec. No one's ever seen a storm hold together that long over land. We're in another section of the Goose Pond Preserve, and I'm standing in the cradle next to a very large pillow. So this pillow and cradle complex are really big, indicative of a big tree that fell down that way, with winds coming out of this direction over here. So over here to my left, there's another stone fence going in that direction. It's running east. In that direction, it's running west. So if I stood on top of this pillow and looked over the cradle, I am looking this way, which means I'm now looking northeast. That's a different orientation than we saw with the hurricane of 38. Now, as you get closer to the coast of, let's say, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, Maine, you can get stand-leveling winds from two types of storms with winds coming out of the northeast. They could be hurricanes, or they could be nor'easters. But this far inland, nor'easters usually do not cause stand-leveling winds this far inland and away from the coast. So this is most likely evidence of a hurricane whose storm track was to the east of Keene, New Hampshire. The hurricane of 38, its storm track was to the west of Keene. So when hurricanes go to the west of an area, the winds come out of the southeastern quadrant. If they go to the east of an area, the winds come out of the northeastern quadrant. Now, along this pillow, there's this black birch behind me here, the bigger of the two black birches. And black birch has a progression to their bark. They start off pretty much smooth bark about the age of 50. Then they start getting vertical fissures in the bark, sometime after 50. By about 80 years, they start developing distinct rectangular bark plates. But by around 120 or more years, those rectangular bark plates start shedding. And I'm guessing this tree is probably around 110, 120 years of age, even though it's not very big. But it colonized on this pillow after this wind event. So that indicates that this wind event, whatever it was, happened well over 100 years ago. And for a pillow this big to form and have its root system rot away completely could take 70 to 80 years. That combination is taking us back around 200 years. So I think what we're actually seeing here is evidence of the Great September Gale of 1815. The eye of that storm passed over Jaffrey and Hillsborough, New Hampshire, which is to our east, meaning the winds that hit this area would be out of the northeast, and maybe a demonstration.
Okay. Are you not entertained? Right? Those were two of the most mind-expanding, mind-blowing things. Now, I want to tell you, I sent this series of videos to someone I will not name, but someone fairly big in the permaculture world. And he watched the first few minutes of it, and he said, I was really disappointed because there's some trees that should be removed, and he didn't say that. And my response was, so we just discovered Einstein giving previously undisclosed mathematics about the theory of relativity, and you're worried about the color of the chalk. Because this video is not about how to manage a forest. This is about how to read a forest. And when I heard him say, I think we're looking at evidence of the Great Gale of 1815, and then give me within a couple hours' time when that tree fell over that's not even there anymore. And what I want to talk to you about, and people have been asking for the channel, I'll give you a couple things about that. One, the videos are all available on YouTube. You can watch them in full. The first ones that what those clips are from is about 34, 36 minutes long. And but it's on a channel that's not that gentleman's channel. I don't know that he has a channel, but once you know his name and once you watch one of his videos, there's tons of videos of his that will come up. So you can find the channels that have them on it. You can subscribe to them. Please do. We need this. But what I wanted to do with it, because I can't say anything to add to what that guy just gave you. I sit in awe of that level of knowledge. But I've realized something over the years. Many of us have that level of knowledge, just not about that thing. When I start looking at some of the things that I know how to do, and some of the things that I just look at and say, well, this is what's going on here. I realize that that doesn't make me important. It makes the thing important. And then I realized when we do these events we were talking about earlier, and I have people come in and they start talking a little bit here and there, and they don't think like they have that. They don't seem like they have a lot to say. Maybe they're a little bit more introverted, and somebody says a thing, and the thing unlocks a thing in their head, and it triggers them. And in a good way, right? Not the way we've come to mean triggered, right? But it triggers them, and it triggers them into, oh, I can help here. And then all of a sudden they go bloof. And you see two people standing there staring, mouth agape, listening to this genius about this one thing. And all of a sudden, this person who didn't want to be in front of a room magically is in front of a room, and they don't care. They don't care that they're in front of a room because they're not in front of a room. The room has coalesced around them, and there's 20 or 30 people straining and looking over the shoulders and listening. And people start going, hey, man, can you guys just take your conversation 10 feet away from us? I want to hear this. And they start consuming this information. And this is what Einstein meant when he said everybody's a genius. The question is, what are they a genius at? And we use a word in our society still today. We don't use it with the reverence that it was used with a couple generations ago or among certain peoples or tribes. We should. And when I say it, most of you will feel a reverence when I say it. Ancestors. Our ancestors. We talk about the lessons and the knowledge and the wisdom and the fortitude of our ancestors. And what we lose when we do that in isolation of ourselves and our time, which is the now that is now. Like I said, I'm going to go a little physicist on you here. Their now was then, but it's still now. Our now is now, and your future descendants, their now will be then, but it's already now. Because you're already an ancestor. The people that you are an ancestor to just aren't here yet. Now, I know that sounds a bit deep, but it's what I call current ancestral wisdom. And people generally know, they generally know the story of the Library of Alexandria. If you don't, I'll give you the very short version. There was a great library. It had all the knowledge that was assembled from all around the world, as much as could be in one place at one time. And then it burned to the ground and the knowledge was lost. And we have no idea some of what was lost there. The current internet and the amount of information recorded on the internet, like this gentleman's work, makes the Library of Alexandria, as amazing as it must have been, look like a fart in the wind. The fact that I could show you what I just did is amazing. But here's the thing. That's a rather older video, and this guy's been around long enough. He was one of Ben Falk's college professors. I did not know this knowledge existed last week. If you had said to me, Jack, do you think a person can walk through the woods, look at the formations of the woods, see a lump with a tree growing out of it, and tell you the lump was made by a tree that you can't even see anymore because it's hundreds of years old and it's gone, and tell you when it fell over, why, down to the hour, I would have said, bullshit. And then I would have thought a little bit about all the crazy shit I've seen in my life and would have went, well, maybe. But I bet you that guy has to be like some special wish doctor or something like that. There's nothing in those videos that is unlearnable by anybody with an IQ above about 90. Right? Even if you don't know there was a great gale in 1815 or the hurricane of 1938 occurred, those things are recorded into history. Okay? And if you can time the event, then you can go back and research the weather event, because I guarantee this guy doesn't have every storm that ever occurred in his mind. Maybe he does by now, but I guarantee when he started, he didn't. But you see a thing, you date a thing, now you know a thing, now you find the thing that caused the thing, and now you understand. Now, this will expand your understanding of the history of a location and what can be done in the future in that location. It will also give you context when somebody tells you Bitcoin makes hurricanes worse. Just for a little reality check against this, right? This guy just showed you a hurricane, the one in 38, that dwarfs every hurricane that's ever happened in the life of every individual that's alive today. Pretty amazing. And could tell you within a half an hour, this is when this tree fell and about when this tree began to grow. And there's more in it. Somebody was talking about the stone walls and saying, like, are they there just to do something with the stones? And actually, no. So where the stone walls are, there was pasture that held sheep. And where there's not walls, I didn't have that part of the video in, that there wasn't pasture. There was just cropland. And so they just did what they call a stone dump. You have all these different sized stones just thrown outside of the cropped area. Because why put the effort into a wall if you're not trying to keep an animal in and out of your crops? Because that wall certainly is not going to keep a deer out. But you also look at this, like there's another thing to learn here. When you watch these videos, all that timberland, all that woodland, and it's all in mountains and hills that looks like it can't possibly be pasture and cropland. Not that long ago it was. And then if we look at the total history of there and we take another modern ancestor who will be an ancestor one day, right? And we all will. Jeff Lawton. And you watched the video I brought to you guys a couple weeks ago about the lessons from the Rust Belt up in Connecticut, which is right near this whole same area. Then you take the sheep and you put those two pieces of information together and you see the entire hydrological power system that was in New England on the rivers that ran the mills before we had modern electricity, took that wool and turned it into material and built the civilization there, which also built tearing down the wilderness to put in pastures for sheep. And it later switched over to cotton. And then when the cotton fell off and modern synthetic fabrics came, the whole industry collapsed and the forestry grew. Pretty freaking amazing when you think about it that way. But you're somebody's ancestor too. You have ancestral wisdom. As I sit now, after doing this podcast for 14 years, one thing I'm incredibly grateful for is everything I've discovered that I know that I can teach, I have. And it may be broken up in pieces, parts over the years. And there may even be places where the understanding evolved over time. And you can see me with a limited understanding, a better understanding, and a good command of a certain thing. It's all recorded. And this is why it's important when we talk about freedom of speech and we talk about a decentralized internet and all this stuff. This is why it's important that we have these alternative platforms. We have these alternative ways that this information is recorded so that no motherfucker can ever burn down the modern Library of Alexandria and take it away from the people we are ancestors of that are not even born yet. That's why. Bullshit. It must never happen again. This type of wisdom must not be denied to people who will be born, that will be born after you're dead. And you must not remain silent. And I'm not talking about silence in the frame of not speaking out against censorship. I don't mean that. You must not remain, to be blunt, fucking silent about the lessons you've learned in history and the knowledge that you have. You must put that knowledge somewhere in the new Library of Alexandria. And it must have copies made over and over and over and over again, because you don't know what they'll shut down and you don't know what will fail. So it's one thing that Google decides we don't want this knowledge around anymore. Let's shut it off. It's another thing. You think Google's so mighty that YouTube will always be here? I don't. I think one day Google, YouTube will be a thing of the past. It will be a footnote in history. But right now, it's a Library of Alexandria. I want you to think back to when the Library of Alexandria really existed. And I want you to imagine that you could have replicated it. And instead of replicating it with scribes and construction crews, you could have replicated it with Control-C, Control-V, Control-C, Control-V, Control-C, Control-V, Control-C, Control-V. If you could have done that, then would we still have that ancient knowledge? And the answer is we wouldn't just have it. We would have more knowledge today from what would have been built upon it. You are somebody's ancestor. Care about them before they're born. Leave behind what you have. And somebody's saying Odyssey. Yes. But I want to say this when people talk about making, Control-C, Control-V copies of the library. That's one copy. We need more people to build more places where this information can be archived forever. So that as long as anybody can fire up a freaking Raspberry Pi or whatever they're going to replace it with in a couple of years, that will make it look like the dark ages of technology, it can be accessed. And we're entering that world where technology and ancient wisdom converge. And what that will make us as a species, if we capitalize on it now, if we are not so arrogant as the people that lived right outside the great Library of Alexandria to think that will never go away. if we cease in our arrogance and find the humbleness and humility to realize that we have contributions to make. See, that's the thing. When you talk like this, people think it's egotistical to say, I have contributions to make to society. I have things that I need to leave behind that after I'm dead will be valuable to somebody in the future. People think that's arrogance, conceit, trying to be the next William Shakespeare, and you think kids are going to be taught your plays 500 years in the future or something. That's not at all what it is. It actually requires humility and humbleness. It really does, because the minute you say it, you accept an obligation, a duty. And you'll notice that the people that are, what we call the elites, the people that are in control of things, they always want to have things their way. They're not big on duty and obligation. They're the arrogant people. They're the ones that say the way things should be. And they're the ones that when they have power and somebody puts something into their structure of power that they don't like, they delete it one way or another. They malign it. They lie about it, etc. When you individually realize that some of the things you know could benefit somebody that will call you an ancestor someday, that will look at you with the reverence that you have when you even hear the word ancestor, it makes you feel tiny, not big. It makes you realize the length of your dash is shorter every day. And I better get the fuck to work. And I want you to think about that. And I want to empower you right now with a way to do better. And this is what I want to finish with today. There's something it's in all time management classes and courses and books and shit. And it's called the 4 Ds of time management. This is a stupid term, and we need to banish it from the Library of Alexandria, right? Other than it's a source. It's where the idea came from. So there were these people one time, because we're in the future now, right? We're in the future now. They were called business people. And they lived their entire days in cubicles, and they were tasked with doing a bunch of shit, and they had to manage their time. And it evolved into something that served all of mankind by changing a single word. We changed time management to self-management. Because somewhere along the way, the people of the ancient world, well, they figured out time was not manageable. That no one could manage time. There's no such thing as time, and there's no such thing as your time. You don't possess time. You don't have time. Time is. We can kill all the people in the world in one go somehow, some magic button. Time will continue. Time is a human construct to explain that which we don't understand. But whatever it is, it's continuous. If we measure it with orbits and rotations, it's constant. It's the constant in our equations. You got it? It's really simple. And that means that you don't manage time. You can only manage yourself, and to some degree, you can manage other humans by tasking them. And if you understand that, then we take this concept of time management, which immediately sits it into a part of our brain that says, while I'm on duty, doing my job at work, I must manage time. And then when I go home to the people I actually give a fuck about, the people that I actually love, the people that if one of them were dying because they needed a kidney, I would risk my life to lay on a table and have my kidney cut out. I don't put this amazing tool away and say it doesn't apply anymore. So what do we change it to? We change it to self-management. I manage me. This is all I can really manage is me. I can manage what I do with my time, but I can't manage time. So now we can actually take these terms, the 4 Ds, change them a little bit, and empower ourselves to be incredible individuals so that we're good ancestors for future generations. The 4 Ds: do, delegate, decline, defer. And I think they should be analyzed in that order in particular. And I'll use an example of me being asked to speak at an event. I always want to say yes. Now you would say doing would be actually showing up and speaking. But when I get the request, my first thing is, do I do this? And there's a tendency for me to want to answer with maybe. That's defer. That's bad. That's deferring. And that's probably not a thing that I should do. I should take an honest assessment snapshot of my life and my future at that time and say, does this fit? And if I'm not going to do it, then can I delegate it? In this instance, there is no way that I can delegate someone speaking in my spot. They can't be Jack Spirko. Okay? Fine. So I can't delegate this time. So I can decline. And then lastly, I'll defer. So deferring would only be, it passes the I want to do it test. I can't delegate this thing. And I don't want to say no yet. Then I need to force myself back into, if I defer, I have to force myself back into do on a time level, right? I get a week to give this person an answer, even if they don't ask me again. And if I don't know a week later, I'm declining. Now, that's very clinical, and it's very much a business thing. But this is how we have to handle our home lives as well. So here's an example of taking this concept of process into your personal life where it seems clinical and not good, but it's actually very important. When I was in the corporate world and I was traveling all the time, and, you know, my son was in grade school, so he was gone most of the day. My wife would be home most days until she decided she wanted a job just for something to do. And I would be gone 3-4 days out of the week. And then we would realize that even when I was home, I was working. And even on weekends, I was trying to get things done on the property. And gee, it's been months since we went out on a date and found a place for the kid to go and went out alone, for instance. And so what I started doing is I put her in my calendar like she was an appointment. Now, when I first did this, she was not amused. She did not think this was the actions of a loving husband. And I probably didn't either until it clicked for me and I started doing it. She thought what I probably thought right up to that point. I can't remember back that far, but basically, if you really care, then you'll just do it. But I sat and I realized something. If I made an appointment to have dinner with a consultant in Hartford, Connecticut at 5:30 Tuesday, 2 months from now. At 5:15, I was at that restaurant talking to the person that would be taking care of us and explaining what I wanted done and saying, when you bring the check, you don't bring the check. I don't even want to see the check. I don't care. When dinner's done, you're going to come back and you're going to ask if I need anything else. And I'm going to hand you my card. And that means no. And like clockwork, I would be in that point at that time, and that would happen because it got scheduled. And we rectified a lot of our problems in not spending time together by scheduling the time. Now, take the 4 Ds into that. And what you'll find out is when your kid wants to do a thing and you say maybe, what you're really saying is I'm deferring this. And it's going to lead to a no. And then you're going to say, wait a minute. I get to be a dad of a kid for a very finite period of time. Maybe I need to do. And that maybe means I need to delegate, decline, or defer other things because this goes to the top of the priority list. And when it comes to the point where we're deciding what we do as future ancestors, the work that needs doing for that, maybe it takes precedent over a lot of things that I think are important that aren't. Like watching the news tell me about a war that I have no influence on. And not head faking myself into the place where I believe that what I think about the thing actually influences what's going to happen. And then I spend my time with worry and stress instead of productivity. And I want you to start at work, at home, in your lives, when something comes to you. Will you, can you, should you, whatever. I want you to just immediately analyze it with the 4 Ds. I'm either going to do this right now, or I'm going to commit to doing it right now and schedule it, right? I'm going to delegate it. Like, this is a thing. It's worthy of doing. Does it require me? Let's go back to the speaking engagement. No, I can't be Jack Spirko at your speaking engagement, period, if I don't say yes. There is no replacement for me. But what are you looking for? If you're looking for an aquaponics expert, I can probably give you 4 you can talk to. Maybe they can fill in. No, they don't bring the clout of TSP and what I can do. But if you really want is someone to speak to your audience about aquaponics, there's probably better people than me. So I can delegate that, right? I can decline it. I'm sorry, this doesn't fit my schedule and I need to be better. That's one of my places I need to be better about. I want to help people so much. I fail to decline. Machiavelli. Those who are kind when they are cruel will be cruel when they shall be kind. It's happened to me over the years. I've gotten much better about it. Or defer. I really am not sure. But then I owe that person, whether it's my grandson or a person I don't know reaching out by email asking me to come to someplace and do a thing, an answer. I don't know. I will give you an answer by. Deference without a deadline is death. Okay? It's death to relationships. It's death to your personal life. It's death to your business. It's death to your business life. It is death to your social network. Deference must come with a deadline. It's probably the 5th D. Maybe I just added one. Deference with a deadline. And if you are unsure, decline. If you are unsure, if you really don't know that you'll be able to, you need to decline. Because it's most likely the case if you reach out a few days later and say, some things have changed. If you really need me to do this, I still can. But once you've said yes, now you got a problem. And once you've deferred and not met an obligation, a reasonable time back, then you've damaged the relationship. And that relationship damage is bad if it's something that's critical in your business or your business network. But we don't seem to realize, I think, as people, especially as people who get into so much in our lives, that it's worse when we do it to people we care about and love. It's far worse. It's far worse. And I want you to add to that nuclear family today, if you've never heard me talk about being an ancestor now before, because I have talked about it before, those people. And your obligation must first be to the people that are walking around and breathing air now in the priority of things. But I actually think it's more important that we do the things that are going to benefit the great-grandchild or great-great-grandchild we will never hold in our arms than we do something for some corporatocracy or we do something for some political cause. Documenting our knowledge and our skills and our awareness of what's happening now in history, because I'll promise you a couple of things about your great-great-great-grandchild. Whatever exists as a system of education, unless we actually take over the world, which is, flip a coin 5 times, and if it happens 5 times in a row, maybe we will. They're not going to learn what you just heard that man talk about reading the forest. And whatever they tell them about the history that you're living through right now, it's not going to be the truth. And even if you want the truth 100 years from now about the great pandemic of 2020, you're going to have to dig really hard to find out what it is, unless we get busy documenting shit. So do you care about your great-great-great-grandchild that will be born in the year 2155? And I'm going to tell you right now, you should. And yes, the 4 Ds. Do delegate, decline, defer are going to have a direct impact on how much you get done for those people and for the people around you right now. All right. Let's go through a few of your comments and questions. Janet Starr, he should have gone up that instant that Chris made a sizable donation to Alopecia Foundation instead of the violence. So Janet saying, what Will should have done to Chris is say, hey, man, you're dissing people with alopecia. You should make a donation to atone for your sins. Okay, but that means you believe that what happened is reality. Actually, what they just made was a sizable donation to Pfizer. Okay, that's what happened there. Period. Jack, are we down to the choice of war with Russia versus the end of the U.S. dollar? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Now, war with Russia may mean more than the end of the U.S. dollar. But that question that Mark's asking reads, though, like, do we have to go to war with Russia to save the dollar? Nothing can save the dollar now, man. The dollar is dying. We killed it. We killed it intentionally. And the reason we killed it isn't because we want the dollar as a thing to go away. It's because they need a new dollar. You got to think about the dollar of today has had 5 defaults since it was created. 5. I won't go through them, but I'll give you an example of one that people just gloss over. The Coinage Act of 1964, where we demonetized silver in our coinage, was a default on the dollar. Nixon was a default on the dollar. Roosevelt was a default on a dollar. The creation of the Federal Reserve was a default on a dollar. You figure out the 5th one if you want to. Okay? The dollar has been defaulted on 5 times. In its current form, it has existed with some tinkering in the 30s and 70s since 1913. It's over 100 years old. They've run everything out of the fucking thing that they can. We need a new dollar. How do you get a new dollar? You dissolve the old one. And that's what they're doing actively right now. And will that mean you'll have a global currency or a globalized dollar? It'll be one of those two things. And in the end, they're going to be the same. And I think what you're going to actually see is you're either going to see a centralized bank digital currency dollar that gets globalized. More likely, you're going to see a centralized digital currency that is the new US dollar. And the mechanism for globalizing it will be stable coins within the FDIC framework. And that will dollarize the globe, because no matter how screwed up the dollar is, it's better than every other state-based currency out there right now. And if you can I've talked about it before, but if you can take your cell phone, download an app, and start doing business in dollars in seconds, and once we get into that realm, a CBDC behind the tethers of the world within the FDIC framework, there'll be dollars in Zimbabwe, and not the few that are scraped up here and there. You will see, as Michael Saylor has predicted, the vast majority of global currencies disintegrate and collapse. And then you'll see the inflation distributed across the global monetary supply and some correction in it. I'm not saying it's going to be a perfect system or it's going to make everything roses. It's actually going to lead to a complete totalitarian surveillance economic global state with us at the helm, because you think we're dying and going away. We're not dying and going away. Our way of life is dying and going away. The hegemon headquartered in DC is anything but going away. Globalism doesn't mean you don't have a headquarters. And if you notice in all your sci-fi shit, global headquarters is always somewhere in the United States. Even in freaking Star Trek, it's in San Francisco, not New York. Probably because New York went into the ocean during the Great Nuclear Holocaust in Star Trek, right? Something like that. Anyway, CEB2 says, Jack, can you talk about building a homestead with aging in mind? I grew a 1/4 acre of greens for myself and local sales. Would a quick cut green harvester be worth it as my back ages? So that your back doesn't age as rapidly. If you are growing greens for market and you do not have a quick cut greens harvester, you are wrong. I don't care what it costs. Figure out what you would pay somebody by the hour to do your job for you. Okay? I want you to cut my greens every day, and you're going to pay them. I don't use minimum wage. So if you're in a place where it's still like right under $8 an hour, use $8 an hour. And then how many weeks would they cut your greens for you? Now you're still having to package them and everything, right? But they just go out and just cut it for you. Then measure how long it takes you to do it with the cutter, and do the math and say, how many hours per week does this save me? And the number will be fairly high from what I know of those machines. And then amateurize that against the cost of labor. And you'll find it'll be way less than a 1-year payback. Now, if you don't do that, you don't just hate your body, you hate money. On a larger mindset of this topic, I think we all need to be thinking this way. And this is why I've been doing a whole lot of bringing the stuff that needs to be touched frequently by my hands for gardening and production up. Bending over sucks. Standing up is much easier to do, right? And then maybe as I age, I'll even think more about pathways that are a little easier to walk. I don't know, right? I do believe that we need to stay as physically active as possible as we age. And I think it's the key to longevity. I think it's one. Maybe I'll do a show on the keys to longevity in the future, but I think it's one of the main keys to longevity is to remain physically active. But there's physical activity and there's unnatural, repetitive physical activity. So we have a lot of diseases in the modern world that didn't exist 1,000 years ago and back. Or I guess that we had slavery then, so the slaves had these repetitive motion injuries. Some of them are lifestyle oriented from the food we eat, and that's the one we focus on. But if you think about something like carpal tunnel syndrome, and I've seen people get carpal tunnel syndrome from computer mice, okay? I've seen it get it from keyboards. But I've also, I had a friend that I worked with when I was in telecom, and he had been in telecom his whole life. And he spent most of his career in telecom doing work on big multi-pair cables, like 300 pair, 600 pair, 900 pair cables, splicing, wire wrapping, punch down, stuff like that. And he had surgery on both his wrists for carpal tunnel. And he said, if you stay in this industry and you stay at the technician level, this is your future. Okay. Do you think our Cro-Magnon freaking era ancestors had carpal tunnel syndrome? Like when we started weaving cloth, we didn't develop carpal tunnel syndrome. When we specialized to the place, this person does nothing but weave cloth every day before we even knew what it was. We started having it, and we called it, when I got old, my hands started to hurt. So I think it's good that we stay active, but we need to stay active in the way a human being is designed to be active. We get up, we walk, we look at things, we touch things, we do pick things up, we do all this dexterity with our hands and our feet and our knees and our body and our back. But the repetitive, consistent, over and over motion, this is not a natural thing for human beings to do. And so we need to minimize the need to do this repetitive motion stuff, because I've talked about it before, but when Europeans first came to North America and they looked at, especially after the great die-off that came from the smallpox and other diseases that we brought from Europe, we're not even sure what really did the most damage, honestly. For all we know, we assume it was smallpox because it was the most deadly thing we had at the time, right? For all we know, there was a cold that we had that was like SARS-V1 to the native population. But the remnant that was left, that went back, in many ways, we set back the civilizations in North America when we spread these diseases, and the population dwindled because they didn't have the populations and the slave labor necessary to maintain agriculture, and they went back living the way that their ancestors lived. And when we encountered those people, we called them giants, and they looked ripped, right? They looked like guys that were in Gold's Gym every day. They weren't out like tying boulders on the end of sticks and doing bench presses. They just went and lived their lives, and they ate well. And that, when I say stay active, that's what I'm saying. Janet Starr said, thus I believe the best use of stimulus checks was to eliminate debts. I think Janet is correct-ish. I am all for eliminating debts. Paying off debt is wonderful. Now I don't have to pay it again. However, in a heavily inflationary economy, good debt, which is leveraged against an appreciating asset, is more valuable than no debt. And this is a place, if you're not ready for this thinking, don't do it, because debt is a force. And when we play with a force and we don't play with it properly, we die. So if we're going to build a dam above where we live in our home, we better get the engineering on the dam right, or eventually the dam will fail and it will kill us. And that's debt. Debt is cancer. You're playing with cancer, but cancer can be useful when leveraged properly. You have to, another way, cancer is probably not the right word. The word I've used to describe debt leverage is a rattlesnake. And that's probably the best thing that you can compare debt to, as a rattlesnake. I can handle a rattlesnake. I'm not going to get bit. I know the rules of handling a rattlesnake. And one of those rules are my fingers, my hands, my skin will never touch the snake skin. I know how far a rattlesnake can strike. I have the proper tools. I have the proper training. I can do everything that needs to be done with the rattlesnake without touching the rattlesnake. The only reason I would have to touch the rattlesnake would be I'm actually some sort of zoologist. I'm taking care of them. I have one with a stuck shed, and I'm willing to risk it to help get the eye caps off of it or something, or it needs to be milked for venom. If I'm not doing one of those two things, I can have rattlesnakes in my possession. I can touch rattlesnakes every day, and I will never get bit by a rattlesnake. If you are not trained and you keep rattlesnakes as pets, there is only a limited amount of time before you go to the hospital with a rattlesnake bite, right? And so that's how you have to look at debt. Until you are properly trained, And here's a rule: if you ever are going to get into hot snakes, and I don't keep them personally, okay, but I will deal with them if I have to. But there's no such thing as a venomous snake with training wheels. The most deadly snake is the one that just bit you, okay, when you're talking about venomous or hots, as we call them in the industry. And look at that way. APM high-density panic rotation, a la Adam Savory. Why haven't you tried it on your land? Okay, so I do the high-density rotation that's possible for me to do on 3 acres on top of limestone shelf. I use ducks for that. I cannot do cattle on 3 acres of my land. It won't work. It's a bad thing. And I don't want cows. And I don't want sheep. Like, part of me a little bit wants sheep, and I could probably make it work. But when you start talking about doing these things, there's an infrastructure investment. And we all have to decide. See, this is one of the things I get with people that like, well, why do you do this? Why don't you do rabbits? Because I don't want freaking the work that goes with rabbits. I only have so much. And this is something that's important. It's not me venting when people ask me. I want you to think this way too. Most of you that end up miserable try to do everything. We should all do the things that are the best fit for our land and the best fit for our lifestyle and the best fit for our budget and the best fit for the design restrictions that we have in our geography and so our macro and our micro geography. So it just doesn't work for me to do it with ruminants. If I had 50 acres that could be at some point decent pasture, and I could do things like use portable infrastructure, step in electro tape, because you ain't stepping that's the thing. People don't get it. Like, you're not doing this here. You are not going to take a pole with a spike on it, move it over here and step it in the ground and then run your freaking electro tape. You're not going to do it any more than you're going to do it on a runway at an airport. It's that hard. It's actually probably harder. I'm sorry. So it just doesn't work here. That's why. Mike V, they recouped my STEMI check in tax returns next April. Okay. Maybe that would to do with the excessive payout of the child tax credit. A lot of people got burned by that. You were given more and then they took it back. That's probably what happened to Mike, because I think he's got a pretty big family. And Iowa Farm Boy says 5-year treasury bond shooting way above 30 years today. The inversion of the curve. Yeah, that's a bad thing. So in other words, right now, the government will pay you more interest to give them your money for 5 years than to give them your money for 30 years. That's a bad sign. That tells you there's not a lot of optimism in the current economic system for 30 years out. That's what that tells you. I think 5 years might be a bit long myself. Nunya Biss, what are all the low stone walls in Eastern PA and New Jersey? They're probably also for managing livestock. Like I said in that video, if you watch the whole series, he'll say you can tell here there was cropland, but there wasn't pasture because they took all the rocks and they just threw them. It's a lot of work to build a stone wall. We think of it, you just stack rocks. If you go look at these walls, right, and you look at the way, and most of them are dry stack. They're dry stack. They're hundreds of years old. Nobody touched them. Trees grew up around them, and they're mostly still there. There was a lot of ancestral wisdom in how to build those walls. So, yeah, usually they had something to do with managing livestock in that whole region. And pretty much anywhere you find them, they found all these walls in California, and it was the same thing. Everybody forgot that it ever was. And they thought, like, maybe the Chinese came over and built the mini Chinese Great Wall or some shit, like, in prehistory. No, it was the same thing when they dug deeper into it. Question for Jack: is Biden the patsy president to default the national debt? Maybe. He's definitely a patsy president. Let's throw the banner up real quick. Let's go, Brandon. Yeah. Some people get mad when I put that up because they think that it's specifically anti-Biden. I'm for just saying F any politician. Next up, Iowa Farm By. Have you read Seasons of America Past? I haven't. It sounds interesting. I will check into it. Nunya Biz says, hail the noble ancestors. And again, have enough humility to realize that applies to you. Like, again, I know it sounds arrogant to say that what you have to say and what you have to leave behind is really, really important. But the reason you don't want to do it isn't because you're humble. It's because you're not. Because the minute you say it, the obligation is there. And now it's real. And now I have to talk about it. Now I have to do it. Don says, who brought this to us, book by Tom Wessels, Forest Forensics, The Myth of Progress Toward a Sustainable Future in Granite, Fire, and Fog, The Natural and Cultural History of Acadia, all available on Amazon. They will all end up in T-Spaz, I'm sure. Don, thank you for that. I'll look those up, and I will put them in the show notes on the audio today. If you want to get them, please remember, if you shop through my links, it does help me out. So it's going to cost you the same money, and you can always find all the stuff I've recommended at tspaz.com. That will be our only commercial content today. Nunya Business says, Red Friday. Remember, everyone deployed, folks. Wear red. I don't know that I'm necessarily going to wear red other than it's here, but I talked about this earlier. Yeah, remember the deployed. That's not remembering the people that have been sent around the world in the name of our government is not an endorsement of the government itself. The people that join the military, I can tell you, someone that joined the military at 17, you believe in what you're doing, and a lot of times they end up long before they have fulfilled their obligation, realizing the truth, and they're stuck. And they do the best they can, and they really think more about the person next to them than what the politician wants. James Richter says, as a father of three, I really appreciate that advice, Jack. Thank you. And he's talking about my scheduling advice. I really encourage you guys to start using the 4Ds and to start using scheduling in your family life. On that, there are more questions that came in while I was answering those, but I am going to decline and maybe defer, because if you get those questions to me, they'll be in a future episode, because I have obligations today that involve my grandchildren and my wife. So with that, I'll wrap up. I'll be back Monday. We'll have another episode of Outback with Jack. Stay alert on social media. I'm probably going to do one of my things where I put things up and ask you guys for questions. And I'm going to be looking for homesteading, permaculture, solutions-based investing, all the things that ignore the first half of today's show when I put that up. I'll catch you guys on Monday.